I lost a game of truth or dare. My boyfriend, Carter Bennett, was forcing me to go eat a pickle right off the tray of Caleb Vance, the school's charity case. What are you waiting for, Maya? Go. I can't wait to see that freak lose his mind. I rubbed my eyes. Was I dreaming? I was back in high school. 17 again. I walked straight up to Caleb. Under his cold, piercing gaze, I reached down, grabbed a slice of pickle from his plate, and popped it into my mouth. He looked up. His eyes were dark, freezing cold. Then, with everyone in the cafeteria watching, I dumped my entire container of expensive salmon sushi onto his tray. Hey, Caleb. Sorry about the pickle. Consider this an upgrade. Hope you don't mind. I looked at the boy who would one day rule the entire tech industry, and gave him my brightest smile. By the way, I'm Maya. Nice to finally meet you. This year, we were both 17. Back then, he was drowning in insecurity, and I was the radiant, spoiled rich girl. But in this lifetime, I would never let those jerks hurt him again. When I opened my eyes again, my boyfriend, Carter, was grinning like an idiot, nudging me to go mess with Caleb's food. Our wealthy friends around the table immediately chimed in. Yeah, Maya. I can't wait to see that arrogant loser look totally humiliated. Ugh, so what if he gets straight A's? He's just a broke nobody. After graduation, he'll probably end up fetching our coffee, Listening to them mock Caleb, I let out a cold laugh. Carter and I both came from filthy rich families. We grew up in the same gated community. Childhood sweethearts, they called us. Naturally, our circle was exclusive, only the rich and powerful. But I hated this circle. I didn't have a choice, though. My parents controlled my life, and they didn't let me hang out with anyone outside our tax bracket. In my past life, 10 years ago, I had listened to them. I went over and snatched a pickle from Caleb's plate. But out of guilt, I had slipped a chocolate bar onto his desk afterward. That was the only interaction we had during our entire high school years. Back then, Caleb always walked with his head down. So low, it felt like he was trying to disappear into the dirt. 10 years later, I had completely forgotten about him. Until we met again at a hot dog cart on a rainy street. By then, he was the famous tech billionaire, a powerful tycoon in Silicon Valley. And I, because of my father's prison sentence and my ex-husband's betrayal, had become the biggest joke in the city. Why did we walk so far just to buy a hot dog from a street cart? A girl carrying a brand new Hermes Birkin complained nearby. Oh, come on. That's not just a hot dog. That's a golden hot dog made by an ex-senator's daughter. Wait, is that really Maya? She looks like she's in her late 30s. It's her, all right. After her dad's company went under, Carter dumped her. That's why she ended up like this. How pathetic. The girl with the Birkin bag smirked and walked up to my cart. Hey, give me 10 more hot dogs. Make sure they're good. I'm going to feed them to my maid and driver. I forced a polite smile. Sure thing, ma'am. You're as kind as you are beautiful. Hearing me call her ma'am made her puff up with pride. Make it 20. The man next to her pulled her back. Why are you buying so many? You're not even going to eat them. She rolled her eyes in disgust. As if I'd ever eat garbage food made by lower-class people. Lower-class food. Once upon a time, I used to buy street food just to feed stray cats, never taking a bite myself. At that moment, the boomerang of my youth hit me right between the eyes. I bit my lip and forced myself to grill faster. Let me help you with that. When Caleb, dressed in a bespoke designer suit, suddenly appeared in front of my cart, I froze. He took me in. I was homeless, and he took me to his private estate. There was no locking me up, no forcing me into anything, nothing inappropriate. He simply acted like an old friend. He gave me a safe place to live and helped me find a decent, respectable job. I was so grateful to him. I kept trying to think of ways to repay him. But I didn't know how. On many nights, when I went downstairs to get a glass of water, I would see Caleb standing by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. A lit cigarette would be resting between his pale fingers. The cold moonlight would wash over him, leaving him completely isolated in a sea of loneliness. More than once, I wanted to walk up and hug him from behind, to comfort him. But I had no right. I was nobody to him. Time passed. He truly wanted nothing from me. He had everything. Maybe he brought me home simply because he felt sorry for me. Just like the way I used to pick up stray dogs and cats when I was a kid. Until he fell ill from years of overwork. Cancer. He still remembered my birthday. He insisted on having me blow out the candles right by his hospital bed. He said, Maya, a birthday always needs to be celebrated properly. Yes, later on, he loved calling me Maya. Due to the brutal chemotherapy, he had lost so much weight. His eyes were sunken, and he looked like a shadow of his former self. Even his hand, as he placed the candle on the cake, was deathly pale, his wrist bones sharply protruding. He forced a weak smile. Maya, happy birthday. His voice was barely a whisper. I had to lean my ear right next to his lips to hear him. I looked at him through my tears, but he just kept smiling at me. Go on, blow out the candle. The way he looked at me made it feel like he was trying to burn my face into his memory forever. Still smiling, his eyes slowly closed. The hand holding mine suddenly lost all its strength and slipped off the bed. The taste of grief hit me, thick and heavy, like wet leaves after a torrential storm. It hurt so bad I couldn't breathe. Trembling, I blew out the candle and closed my eyes to make a wish. God, for my 27th birthday, please let me go back to when I was 17. To my absolute shock, my wish came true. When I opened my eyes again, my rich friends were pushing me. Maya, what are you spacing out for? Go. I can't wait to see him lose his temper. They were grinning maliciously, looking toward Caleb's table. 17-year-old Caleb was sitting in the corner of the cafeteria, eating alone. The lighting was dim over there, and his back looked so lonely. Just like he did when he was 27. Whether he was dirt poor or filthy rich, he was always entirely alone. Seeing him young and healthy again made my eyes sting with tears. I picked up my tray and walked straight over to him. As I approached, intending to sit next to him, he noticed. He immediately squeezed himself further into the cramped corner. His tray was practically empty. Just 2 slices of plain toast and some pickles. An agonizing pain shot through my chest. When he had cancer in my past life, he could have fought longer with chemo. But the doctors said his body was too weak. He had suffered from severe malnutrition during his teenage years, which had permanently ruined his health. In the end, he couldn't even survive the second round of chemo. Looking at his thin, pale face, my throat felt incredibly tight. Hey, can I have? I tried to control my emotions, but I couldn't even finish the sentence. He must think I'm a total psycho right now. Taking a deep breath, I stopped talking. Under his shocked gaze, I used my forks to grab a piece of his pickle and put it in my mouth. It was salty, sour, and tasted like cardboard. Caleb, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I'm late. When I looked up, his expression was incredibly cold. You know, they give out free pickles at the counter. Please stop playing these stupid games. By now, half the cafeteria had stopped eating. Everyone was watching us, whispering loudly. The table right in front of us was the loudest. Maya is savage. She actually went to mess with the Jinx. Did you know his nickname in middle school was the Curse? Wait, why? Because he literally got his own parents killed, and his little sister too. Hearing this, Caleb's fist clenched so hard the veins on his pale hand bulged. Before the girl at the front table could finish her sentence, I stood up and slammed my hand down. Didn't your parents ever teach you not to talk trash behind people's backs? Still furious, I snapped, oh, wait, you actually have parents, but clearly, they forgot to teach you any manners. The girl, knowing my family was powerful, didn't dare fight back. She just muttered under her breath, did she lose her mind? Wasn't she trying to bully Caleb too? I was so angry I was about to step out of my seat to give her a piece of my mind. But then, a cold touch wrapped around my wrist. It was Caleb. He was holding me back. Just sit down and eat. His tone was flat, and his face had already returned to a calm, emotionless mask. I sat back down. In front of everyone, I dumped all of my premium salmon sushi onto his plate. I gave him an apologetic smile. This is for the pickle. Please don't hate me. Oh, and by the way, even though we've been in the same grade forever, we've never officially met. Hi, 17-year-old Caleb. I'm 17-year-old Maya. I flashed a bright smile and extended my hand to him. My words came out like a rapid-fire machine gun. He just stared at me, dumbfounded. I'm done eating, he said quietly after a long silence. He stood up and walked away, leaving me sitting there, holding a chocolate bar in my hand that was already starting to melt from the heat of my palm. In my past life, even though I knew it was wrong, I had listened to Carter and took Caleb's food. Because I found his food disgusting, I threw it straight into the trash. Then, out of pure guilt, I left a chocolate bar on his desk before leaving. Carter had laughed, saying that chocolate would be the most expensive thing Caleb would ever eat in his life. But 10 years later, while helping Caleb organize his study, I found that exact same chocolate bar on his desk. Caleb had kept it inside a beautiful, sealed glass case. At that moment, 1,000 thoughts had rushed through my mind, and my heart had broken into a million pieces. That chocolate bar was the key to his deepest, most hidden secret. But back then, the massive gap in our social status made me bury all my feelings. Besides, it was just a piece of chocolate. Did it really mean anything? I was no longer a rich senator's daughter back then. I had no right to stand by his side. Maya, that was brutal. Dumping your leftovers on the jinx? Damn, when it comes to humiliating people, you really take the crown. Carter slid into the seat next to me, grinning. I stared at him, disgusted. So in their eyes, what I just did was a form of humiliation. Did Caleb think so too? Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I just wanted him to have a decent lunch, but my execution was terrible. Jackson Sterling sat down on my other side, speaking in his usual slow, arrogant drawl. But why did you defend him? Those girls weren't lying. Caleb did kill his parents and his sister. If you get too close to him, his curse might rub off on you. Jackson was the principal's son. He basically ruled the school. He was violent and loved bullying weaker students, always calling it just playing a little game. In my past life, after my family went bankrupt, Carter's attitude toward me did a complete 180 overnight. He actually tried to push me into Jackson's bed just to secure a business deal for his family. And back then, I was stupid enough to think they still cared about me. Until we went on a joint family trip, and Carter went to another room while Jackson walked into mine. That was when I realized our entire circle was rotten to the core. I rolled my eyes at Jackson. Are you seriously that superstitious? If curses are real, you should be worried about getting struck by lightning for being such a piece of trash. Jackson's face instantly turned red with rage. What did you say, Maya? Say that again. Seeing the tension, Carter quickly stepped in to play peacemaker. Whoa, chill. Jackson, she's just having an off day. Don't take it personally. I violently slapped Carter's hand away. You're no better, you absolute parasite. Both of them stared at me, completely stunned. They couldn't understand why the usually compliant Maya had suddenly turned into a tiger. Before they could react, I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the classroom. I couldn't stand being near these disgusting people for another second. By the time I got back to the classroom, the bell had already rung. I would have to wait until after class to explain to Caleb that I didn't mean to insult him with the sushi. This period was AP Calculus, my absolute worst subject. Even though my mind was racing, I forced myself to pay attention. In my past life, because I neglected my studies, I ended up at a mediocre college. After graduation, I immediately married Carter. I spent the first half of my life relying on my dad, and the second half relying on my husband. That's how a person becomes completely useless. Because I had no real skills and a useless degree, I ended up flipping hot dogs on the street. Since God gave me a second chance, I was going to make it count. But looking at the complex math problems, I sighed and glanced around the room. My eyes landed on the left front row. Caleb was staring intently at the board. His frame was thin, his face pale. Compared to the intimidating billionaire he would become in 10 years, the current him was just a shy, insecure boy. Maya. What are you staring at? Stand up and answer the question. Because I was staring at Caleb too intensely, the math teacher caught me red-handed. I stood up calmly and said with a straight face, I was looking at Caleb. The entire class gasped. Caleb kept solving his math problem, but his pale ears flushed a bright, unmistakable red. The teacher was furious. Oh really? And what exactly are you looking at? Tell us, or you're staying after class. I smiled brightly. I was looking at him because he's handsome. The classroom erupted into chaos. The calculus classroom fell so silent you could hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights humming against the ceiling. A collective gasp rippled across 30 desks. Carter's pen snapped in half. Across the aisle, blue ink spurting onto his manicured fingernails. Jackson stopped chewing his gum, his jaw hanging open like a rusted hinge. And Caleb? Caleb's hand froze mid-equation. His shoulders shot up, stiff as iron, and a slow, crimson tide bloomed from the collar of his worn, oversized flannel, racing up his throat and staining the shell of his ears a furious, burning red. Mr. Harrison, a man who had dedicated 30 years of his life to trigonometric functions and had zero tolerance for high school antics, slammed his dry erase marker onto the podium. Miss Montgomery, Mr. Harrison's voice thundered, vibrating the metal frames of the windows. This is an AP Calculus class, not a reality television show. If you find Mr. Vance's face more captivating than the Taylor series expansion, you Can explain your artistic appreciation to the principal during detention. I don't need detention to appreciate talent, Mr. Harrison, I replied smoothly, sitting down with my hands folded over my neat leather binder. And I wasn't joking. Caleb's working on question 4, isn't he? He's already 3 steps ahead of the textbook solution because he's using Lagrange multipliers instead of standard optimization. If that's not impressive, I don't know what is. The teacher blinked. He looked from me to the whiteboard, then down at Caleb's paper. Caleb had ducked so low his forehead was nearly touching his desk, his fingers gripping his pencil until his knuckles turned as white as chalk. That is actually correct, Mr. Harrison muttered, caught entirely off guard. He cleared his throat loudly. Be that as it may, keep your eyes on your own paper, Miss Montgomery. 10 minutes after school. Both of you, to organize the department's archive room. Gladly, I murmured. Behind me, Carter leaned forward, his breath hot against my neck. What the hell is wrong with you, Maya? He hissed, his voice laced with suppressed rage. Are you out of your mind? You're making a fool out of me in front of everyone. I didn't even turn around. I pulled my gold compact mirror from my purse, adjusted my lip gloss, and snapped it shut with a crisp clack. You did that all by yourself the moment you spoke, Carter, I whispered back softly. Now back off. You're smothering me. For the rest of the period, I didn't look at Carter once. My eyes remained glued to the back of Caleb's head. I remembered his funeral in my past life, if you could even call it that. It had been a sterile, rain-drenched affair held at a private crematorium in Santa Clara. There were no family members. No tearful eulogies. Only a few high-ranking tech executives in dark suits who stayed for 10 minutes to pay respect to the billionaire CEO of Vance Dynamics before slipping back into their limousines. I had stood in the back under a broken umbrella, clutching the faded chocolate wrapper I'd found in his office desk after he died. He had spent his entire adult life building a digital empire, surrounded by hundreds of employees, yet he had died alone in a sanitized hospital room with only a washed-up, disgraced street vendor to hold his hand. Not this time, I swore to myself, watching the slight rise and fall of his thin shoulders. Not this time, Caleb. When the final bell chimed, signaling the end of the day, the classroom emptied rapidly. Carter tried to grab my arm as I packed my bag, his fingers digging into my blazer. We need to talk, Carter growled, his golden boy facade cracking to reveal the ugly, entitled temper underneath. My dad invited your parents to the country club for dinner tonight. You're coming with me, and you're going to stop acting like a lunatic. I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. Touch me again, Carter, and I'll tell my father about the underground poker ring you run in the varsity locker room. Do you think he'll still want your dad as a primary investor if he knows his prospective son-in-law is running illegal gambling operations on school grounds? Carter's eyes widened in sheer panic. How do you know about that? I know everything about you, I snapped, wrenching my arm free. Now get out of my sight. He stood frozen as I walked past him, heading straight toward the basement library where the department archives were kept. The archive room smelled of yellowed paper, floor wax, and decades of forgotten dust. When I opened the heavy oak door, Caleb was already there. He had pulled a tall wooden ladder against the back shelves and was methodically hauling heavy metal file boxes down to the floor. He looked so frail. His dark blue denim jacket was frayed at the cuffs, hanging loosely off his sharp shoulder blades. He worked silently, efficiently, like a shadow trying hard not to disturb the air around it. I closed the door behind me. The heavy click echoed in the small room. Caleb visibly flinched. He didn't turn around, but his posture went completely rigid. I can handle this alone, he said, his voice quiet, gravelly from disuse. You don't have to stay. I pulled off my blazer, draped it over a dusty desk, and rolled up the sleeves of my white silk blouse. Mr. Harrison assigned both of us. Besides, I want to be here. He stopped moving. Slowly, he turned his head to look at me. His eyes were dark, shadowed by dark circles that spoke of late-night shifts and chronic lack of sleep, but beneath the exhaustion lay an undeniable, piercing intelligence. What do you want, Maya? He asked flatly. Is this a new game? Did Carter Double the bet? The words felt like a physical slap to my chest. Of course he thought that. Why? Wouldn't he? For 3 years, our circle had made his life a living hell. We had treated him like scenery at best, and a punching bag at worst. There is no bet, Caleb, I said softly, stepping closer. He immediately stepped back, his spine slamming into the bookshelf. He stared at me with intense vigilance, like a stray dog expecting a stone to be thrown at his head. I don't believe you, he said coldly. Girls like you don't talk to people like me unless there's a camera running or a punchline waiting at the end. Girls like me. I repeated, a sad laugh escaping my lips. Girls like me are stupid, arrogant, and blind. But sometimes, girls like me wake up. I reached into my bag and pulled out my calculus textbook, along with my thick, leather-bound notebook. I laid them on the table between us. Look, I said, pointing to a page covered in messy red ink and big, harsh red crosses. I'm failing. My dad threatens to cut off my allowance if I don't keep my GPA above 3.5, and I don't understand a single thing about differential equations. You're the best math student in the state. I want you to tutor me. Caleb stared at the open notebook, then back at my face. He seemed completely bewildered, his mind trying to analyze an equation that made no logical sense. You have a private tutor, Caleb said flatly. Your family pays $300 an hour for an MIT graduate. My private tutor is an idiot who spends half the time flirting with me and the other half doing the problems for me so he can get his paycheck, I said. Honestly. He doesn't teach me anything. You can. I don't have time, Caleb snapped, turning back to the files. I work 6 days a week after school. I wash dishes at the diner on 4th Street, and I clean the computer lab at night. I don't have time to play academic savior for a rich girl. I'll pay you, I said immediately. He stiffened, his knuckles turning white around the edge of a file box. I don't take charity. It's not charity. It's a job. I insisted, stepping around the table to face him directly. $50 an hour. 3 days a week. We can do it right here. In the library, right after school, before your diner shift starts. It's legitimate work, Caleb. You get paid, I pass calculus, and nobody bullies you while you're teaching me. He looked down at me, his deep-set eyes searching my face for any sign of deception, mockery, or cruelty. He was looking for the spoiled heiress who usually giggled behind her designer purse when her boyfriend knocked his books onto the floor. He found nothing except my desperate, pleading eyes. Why me? He whispered, his voice cracking slightly. Why do you care? Because in 10 years, you died in my arms while I was penniless, I wanted to scream. Because you spent millions buying me out of misery, and I never even gave you a proper thank you. Instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat and looked him dead in the eye. Because you're the only person in this entire godforsaken school who actually works for what he has, I said quietly. And because I was wrong about you. For a long time. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy with unsaid words. The ancient clock on the wall ticked steadily. Finally, Caleb let out a slow, shuddering exhale. He rubbed his temples with his long, thin fingers. $40 an hour, he muttered, looking away. 50 is ridiculous. And if you miss a session or complain about the work, I walk. A burst of genuine, ecstatic joy bloomed in my chest. I couldn't stop the massive smile from spreading across my face. Deal. I almost shouted, extending my hand to him. He looked at my outstretched hand like it was a live grenade. Slowly, tentatively, he reached out his pale, calloused hand and gave mine a brief, stiff shake. His skin was freezing cold, but to me, it felt like the warmest thing in the world. The Montgomery estate sat on a hill overlooking the ocean, a sprawling glass and stone mansion that felt more like a modern museum than a home. That night, dinner was an unbearable affair. My father, Arthur Montgomery, sat at the head of the long mahogany dining table, his sharp eyes calculating every movement. My mother, elegant and distant, sat opposite him, sipping Pinot Noir. On my left sat Carter and his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. So, Maya, Mr. Bennett smiled heartily, cutting into his dry-aged steak. Carter tells us you've been feeling a bit under the weather lately. Something. About causing a scene in the cafeteria? I picked up my silver fork, casually swirling a piece of asparagus. Not under the weather, Mr. Bennett. Just cleaning house. Carter shot me a warning look from across the table. Maya was just stressed about her college applications, Dad. She wasn't feeling herself. Actually, I felt more like myself today than I have in years, I said calmly, taking a sip of water. In fact, I've made a few decisions about my future. My father paused, his fork hovering midair. Decisions? What kind of decisions? Maya? We already agreed you're applying to Columbia for business administration. So you can take over the regional branches after you and Carter get married. In my past life, this was the exact path laid out for me. A pre-packaged life. Designed to merge the Montgomery and Bennett capital. A match made in corporate heaven that ended in my family's total financial destruction when the Bennett group betrayed my dad, framed him for embezzlement, and stripped us of every cent we owned. I'm not going to Columbia, I said, setting my glass down with a soft clink. And I'm not marrying Carter. The dining room instantly plunged into dead silence. Mrs. Bennett gasped, clutching her diamond necklace. Carter's face drained of all color. Maya, what kind of ridiculous joke is this? My mother scolded, her voice sharp as glass. Apologize to the Bennetts at once. It's not a joke, Mother, I replied, turning my gaze toward Carter. Carter is a liar, a coward, and a bully. Today in the cafeteria, he tried to force me to humiliate a boy who has more integrity in his little finger than Carter has in his entire body. Furthermore, Carter spends his weekends running illegal sports, betting out of the varsity locker room. That's a lie. Carter yelled, slamming his hands on the table and standing up. She's insane. She's making things up because she's throwing a tantrum. Is it a lie? I pulled my phone out of my pocket, tapped the screen, and placed it on the center of the table. It played a clear, crisp audio recording, a recording I had taken during lunch period when Carter was bragging to Jackson Sterling about his weekend earnings. Made $5,000 off the senior football game alone, Carter's voice echoed clearly through the dining room speaker. The principal's son covers for me, so the cops won't ever look into it. Carter's father stared at his son, his face turning an ominous shade of purple. Carter, is this true? Dad, wait, I can explain. Get out, my father roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Arthur Bennett, get your degenerate son out of my house before I call the school board. And the police. The dinner exploded into chaos. Screaming matches broke out, chairs were pushed back, and Mrs. Bennett began to sob hysterically as my father's security team escorted the Bennetts out the front doors. My mother sank into her chair, clutching her forehead. Maya, what have you done? The merger. The stocks. I saved this family, Mother, I said coldly, standing up from the table. If you stayed partnered with the Bennetts, they would have bled you dry within 5 years. You should be thanking me. I turned and walked up the grand staircase to my bedroom, leaving my parents in stunned silence. I locked my door, leaned against the heavy wood, and let out a long, ragged breath. One major disaster rewritten. One knot untied. Now, I could focus entirely on Caleb. For the next 3 weeks, my life took on a rigorous, unbreakable routine. Every day after school, while Carter glared at me from across the parking lot, and Jackson spread malicious rumors about my sanity, I marched straight to the quietest corner of the school library. There, sitting at a sunlit wooden table near the back windows, Caleb would be waiting. He was a tough teacher. He had zero patience for sloppy work or skipped steps. You skipped the chain rule here, Caleb pointed out softly, his slender index finger hovering over my paper. He smelled faintly of cheap laundry detergent and clean rain. If you don't differentiate the inner function first, the entire integral collapses. I hate the chain rule, I groaned, dropping my head onto my folded arms on the desk. Why does everything in math have to be so complicated? Caleb looked down at me. A microscopic, almost invisible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, the very first spark of warmth I had seen on his face in weeks. Because complex things are precise, Caleb said quietly. If it were simple, anyone could do it. And then it wouldn't be worth anything. I lifted my head, resting my chin on my hands, staring directly into his dark eyes. Is that how you view people, too? He stiffened slightly, pulling his hand back and adjusting his worn sleeves. People aren't math, Maya. Math doesn't lie to you. It doesn't promise one thing and do another. It just exists. Some people don't lie, I whispered gently. He didn't answer. He looked out the window, where the afternoon sun was casting long, golden rays across the library floor. Over those 3 weeks, I noticed subtle changes. I started leaving extra items in my bag. Extra tuna sandwiches wrapped in foil, fresh apples, boxes of organic juice, and high-protein snacks. My mom packed too much. I would lie casually, pushing a gourmet roast beef sandwich across the table toward him. I can't finish it. If I take it home, she'll think I'm on a weird crash diet and lecture me for an hour. Please eat it, so I don't have to throw it away. At first, Caleb refused, his pride flare up like a defensive shield. But eventually, hungry and exhausted from his grueling schedule, he began to accept them. Color slowly returned to his cheeks. The dark circles under his eyes began to fade. He didn't look like a walking ghost anymore. He looked like a handsome, incredibly smart 17-year-old boy. One Friday afternoon, as we were wrapping up our session, Caleb hesitated while packing his worn canvas backpack. He reached inside and pulled out a small, silver thumb drive. He set it carefully on my notebook. What's this? I asked, looking up. It's a program, Caleb said, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. I saw you struggling with graphing three-dimensional vector fields last night. I wrote a small rendering algorithm last night. It visualizes the rotations in real time so you don't have to draw them out manually. I picked up the tiny silver drive. It was cool against my skin. He had spent his precious, sleep-deprived night writing a custom software program just to help me understand graphics. In my past life, this very algorithm, the Vance rendering core, was what made him a multi-billionaire at age 25. It revolutionized 3D processing and spatial computing. And right now, it was sitting on a thumb drive in a high school library, created solely because he saw me struggling. My eyes welled with hot, uncontrollable tears. Caleb saw my eyes shimmer and instantly panicked. I'm sorry. If you don't want it, you don't have to use it. I didn't mean to offend you, I just thought. Caleb, I choked out, grabbing his wrist before he could pull back. He froze. His skin flared warm under my touch. It's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me, I whispered, tears spilling over my lashes and trailing down my cheeks. Thank you. Caleb stared at me, his chest rising and falling heavily. For the first time, he didn't pull his hand away. He let me hold his wrist, his pulse beating fast and steady under my fingers. You're crying over a math algorithm, he said, his voice thick with a strange, overwhelming emotion. I'm crying because you're amazing, I replied softly, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. And because you have no idea how incredible you really are. The annual Valley High Science and Tech Expo was the biggest event of the spring semester. University recruiters and venture capitalists from across the state attended to scout young talent. Caleb had entered his prototype software, an early iteration of an artificial intelligence compiler designed to optimize low-level machine code. It was brilliant, far beyond anything high school students were capable of creating. I knew he needed the $20,000 first-place scholarship to pay for his tuition at Stanford. In the past life, he had missed the competition because someone had deliberately ruined his hardware the night before, forcing him to skip college and work full-time at a repair shop until he saved enough money. Years later, I wasn't going to let history repeat itself. On the evening before the expo, the school was quiet. Most students had already set up their booths in the gymnasium and gone home. I stayed behind, hiding in the second-floor hallway near the computer labs. At 7 p.m., I saw two figures sneaking down the corridor, holding heavy metal baseball bats and a bottle of industrial acid. It was Carter Bennett and Jackson Sterling. Are you sure the freak isn't here? Jackson whispered, adjusting his dark hoodie. Yeah, he's at his diner shift until 9, Carter sneered, his face dark with malice. We smash his server setup and pour the acid over his motherboards. Let's see him win a scholarship when his project is a pile of melted plastic. Maya thinks he's so special. I'm going to ruin him. My blood ran ice cold. as they reached the door of the computer lab and pulled out a stolen master key. I stepped out of the shadows, holding my phone right in front of my chest. "Looking for something, boys?" I said loudly, my voice echoing down the empty hall. Carter and Jackson whipped around, startled. "Maya?" Carter gasped. Then his eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, holding up my phone, which was currently broadcasting a live stream to the school board's public portal and the local police department's tip line. "Say cheese, Carter. You're live on air." Jackson's face went white. "Shut that off, you crazy bitch." He lunged forward, swinging the metal bat toward my phone. I dodged to the left, but Jackson was heavy and fast. He grabbed my shoulder, throwing me violently against the metal lockers. My head hit the hard surface with a terrifying crack, and pain exploded behind my eyes. I sank to the floor, my vision blurring. "Grab her phone. Destroy it," Carter yelled frantically. Jackson reached down to grab my neck. "Get away from her." A terrifying, guttural roar ripped through the hallway. Before Jackson could touch me, a dark silhouette burst from the end of the hall. Like a furious storm. It was Caleb. He didn't hesitate. He tackled Jackson at full speed, slamming the bigger boy into the hard linoleum floor. The baseball bat clattered across the ground. "Caleb!" I screamed, forcing myself up against the lockers, my head spinning. Jackson recovered quickly, throwing a heavy punch that caught Caleb flush on the cheekbone. Caleb's head snapped back, blood spraying from his lip, but he didn't stop. Driven by a raw, primal rage he had suppressed for years, Caleb slammed his fists into Jackson's face again and again until Jackson lay groaning, bleeding, and defeated on the floor. Carter, terrified out of his mind by the savage look in Caleb's eyes, dropped his bottle of acid and turned to run down the stairs. "Don't bother running, Carter," I yelled after him, clutching my bleeding forehead. "The security cameras caught everything. It's over." Caleb stood over Jackson, breathing heavily, his chest heaving, his fists dripping with blood. He slowly turned toward me. The violent, wild fury in his eyes melted away the moment he saw me slumped against the lockers, blood dripping down my temple. "Maya," he choked out, dropping to his knees beside me. His hands were shaking violently as he hovered over me, afraid to touch me, afraid to hurt me. "Maya. Oh God, are you okay? Are you breathing?" "I'm fine," I whispered, reaching up to touch his bloodied cheek. "I'm fine. Caleb. I saved your project." "To hell with the project," Caleb roared, his voice breaking into a ragged sob. Tears cut through the dust and blood on his pale face. "Why did you do this? Why did you put yourself in danger for me? I'm nothing. I'm just a broke, useless nobody. Don't you dare say that," I cried out, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him close, burying my face in his shoulder. "You are everything, Caleb. You are smart, and kind, and strong. I would do it 1,000 times over just to keep you safe." Caleb froze. Then, slowly, his trembling arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me into him with a fierce, desperate strength, as if he were a drowning man clinging to his only lifeline in a stormy sea. He wept silently into my hair, his shoulders shaking, releasing years of accumulated pain, loneliness, and grief into the quiet, blood-stained hallway. The fallout from that night was swift and absolute. The video evidence was indisputable. Jackson Sterling was arrested for assault and battery, and his father was forced to resign from his position as principal. In disgrace. Carter Bennett was expelled, and as news of his illegal gambling ring broke, his family's company suffered a massive stock crash, leading to their complete financial collapse within months. My father, recognizing Carter's true nature and realizing how close he had come to ruin, finally began listening to my business advice. I guided him away from high-risk investments, securing our family's fortune for decades to come. The next day, despite his bruised face and bandaged hands, Caleb presented his compiler at the Valley Tech Expo. He won first place unanimously. The judges called his work revolutionary. Representatives from Stanford, MIT, and Silicon Valley venture capital firms lined up at his booth, eager to hand him full-ride scholarships and seed funding. Through it all, as reporters took photos and university deans shook his hand, Caleb stood tall, But his eyes kept wandering to the back of the room, where I stood, holding a bandage over my forehead, smiling at him with tears in my eyes. He brushed past a group of investors, walked straight through the crowd, and stopped in front of me. In front of everyone, the press, the teachers, the students who had spent years calling him the curse. Caleb reached out, took my hand, and intertwined his fingers with mine. "Come with me," he said softly. He led me out of the crowded gymnasium, down the sunlit corridors, all the way to the quiet, peaceful library garden at the back of the school. The spring air was crisp, filled with the sweet scent of blooming cherry blossoms. Caleb turned to face me. He looked down at our joined hands, his thumb gently stroking the back of my palm. "I went back to my old middle school desk last week," Caleb said quietly, his voice deep and warm. "I wanted to remember something." I looked up at him, curious. "What did you want to remember?" 10 years ago, or what feels like 10 years ago, someone left a chocolate bar on my desk," Caleb whispered, looking up into my eyes. His gaze was so deep, so full of endless devotion, it took my breath away. I was starving that day. I hadn't eaten in 2 days because we had no money. I thought about ending everything that night. I gasped, my heart slamming against my ribs. And then, Caleb continued, a gentle, tender smile appearing on his lips. This beautiful, radiant girl walked into the room. She was way out of my league. She looked at me like I was invisible, but before she left, she put a silver chocolate bar on my desk. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sealed glass case. Inside was the silver wrapper of that very chocolate bar. "I never ate it," Caleb whispered. "I kept it. Every time I wanted to give up. Every time the world told me I was cursed, I looked at this wrapper and told myself, one day, I will be worthy of standing next to her." Tears spilled over my eyes, bright and clear in the spring sunlight. "Caleb," I choked out. "I don't know why you changed your mind about me 3 weeks ago, Maya," Caleb said, his hands reaching up to gently frame my face, his thumb softly wiping away my tears. "I don't know if it was a miracle, or a dream, or just luck. But I know one thing." He leaned down, his forehead resting gently against mine, his breath warm against my lips. "I love you," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling with absolute sincerity. "I've loved you since I was 7 years old, and I will love you until the day I die. In this life, and in every life after." I closed my eyes, a sob of pure, unadulterated happiness tearing from my chest. I threw my arms around his neck, pulling him down into a deep, passionate kiss. Under the falling cherry blossom petals. He kissed me back with a fierce, tender hunger, holding me as if I were the most precious treasure in the universe. The nightmare of the past life was gone. The cold rainy streets, the street food cart, the chemotherapy machines, the early grave, all of it had melted away into dust. We had rewritten our destiny. The Silicon Valley evening rain tapped gently against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of a penthouse mansion overlooking the San Francisco Bay. Inside, the grand room was warm, filled with the soft glow of a crackling fireplace and the soft strains of classical piano music. I stood by the window, wearing an elegant silk gown, holding a glass of sparkling champagne. Behind me, 2 firm, warm arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me back against a broad, strong chest. Caleb nestled his chin into the crook of my neck, kissing my skin softly. He smelled of rich cedar, clean rain, and expensive cologne. He was 27 today. His face was full of health and vitality, his shoulders broad and strong beneath his tailored suit. He was the undisputed titan of the global tech industry, the founder of Vance Dynamics, a man respected and admired across the entire world. And he was entirely, utterly mine. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Vance?" Caleb whispered in my ear, his deep voice sending a pleasant shiver down my spine. I turned in his arms, smiling up at my handsome husband. "I was thinking about hot dogs." Caleb laughed, a rich, vibrant sound that filled the entire room with warmth. "Hot dogs? On your birthday?" "Emicham," I grinned, reaching up to adjust his silk tie. "I was thinking, 10 years ago, I made a wish. I wished that I could give you the world." Caleb looked down at me, his eyes overflowing with endless, unconditional love. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it. Inside sat a stunning, custom-designed diamond ring, shaped like a glowing constellation of stars. And right next to the ring box on the side table stood a pristine, custom glass display case. Inside the case sat two things, an old, silver chocolate wrapper, and a tiny, gold-plated fork holding a single, polished piece of silver pickle. You didn't give me the world, Maya, Caleb whispered, slipping the ring onto my finger and pressing his lips softly to my forehead. You are my world. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly against the glass, but inside, surrounded by warmth, love, and a second chance at life, we were home.